Welcome back to the Other Side Lifestyle Podcast with Jim and Aram. Today, you're going to have to deal with a little bit of a language barrier. Today, we have Coach Samuel Jean Forget, and he is obviously very Italian with a name like that, and you're just going to have to deal with a little bit of the accent.
I'll
So,
do my
yeah,
best.
man, what's going on, Coach Sam?
What's going on? You nailed that. I'm surprised when people even get the last name, never mind the full name. So, tip of the
I
hat to
like
you.
I like it.
And
Thank you.
and
We practiced ahead of time.
we
No, that was
we
totally on
all
the spot.
we also have to be very clear that for whatever reason the internet believes. I just realized that my mic was not plugged in. Now it is.
And it sounds no different. God, get
Yeah.
a
I didn't
fucking
notice.
better mic, piece of
Hold
shit.
on. Hold on.
We all have the same mic right now.
What about now? Now it's better. So the internet used to believe for whatever reason, and I was part of the internet that believed that Sam was my height, which is 5'8". And after seeing a video of Sam doing an overhead press seated today, I realized this man has some long tibias and some very long femurs. There's no way he's 5'8". And then he just today confirmed that he's a whopping 6'1". So Sam, what is it like up there?
Thanks for clearing up the misinformation. I truly am so curious. What about my online presence screams 5'7"? Because that is easily the most common thing people say when they meet me after seeing something online. I don't know if it's my posture in videos. I don't know what I need to do, but yeah, my
You're
online
you're
persona. Go
you're
ahead.
always here up,
True.
right? Like you're
Oh,
never like I don't really ever do much full body. You're not doing much full body, so people really never get a scope
True. It's a lot
of
of
like how
talking head
tall.
videos, kind of selfie
Yeah,
style stuff until the occasional workout video where somebody sees how long my legs are and then that exposes the truth.
yeah. It's the bottom half that gives everything away.
Yep.
So Sam is quite the world traveler. He does not spend any too much time in one place. Talk about kind of how you're able to live in the online space and serve a multitude of clients very, very well, because I really do think you're one of the best out there. I say that to a lot of our guests, but that's because we only bring the best on. But
I appreciate
it's
that.
not, it doesn't invalidate that you're also awesome, because there's
just
room
don't
for
listen to just don't listen to any episodes, and then you'll know
you're the
this was a
best.
special.
I'm the
Yeah,
best. Yeah, it's
you're the
just
best.
me.
Special guest on today.
I'm the first
But
guest you've said that to.
yes, absolutely. And that's kind of how I used to deal with all the girlfriends I used to date. You're the best. I love you. But how, so you travel a lot. I don't remember, like every time we text, you're in a different time zone, you're in a different country. How are you able to do that and still manage and care for all the people that you work with?
Well, I'd say the biggest thing is, although I do, or I should say I have historically bounced around a lot, I am in New York now for the foreseeable future. Everywhere I go, it's essentially just me living in another place. So I think a lot of people see the geo tags and where the hell is he now? What's going on? And it's not like these are vacations where I'm bouncing around to this place and that place and doing a bunch of touristy stuff. And the client work is almost, I'll get to it when I get to it. Every place I've gone in the last, say, 2.5 years, for the most part, it's at least a month, if not 2 to 3, even 6 months. So I get into virtually the same exact routine no matter where I am in the world, no matter where I am in the country, where it's wake up, do client work, get some writing done, midday break for the gym, go back to my inbox. So and the only thing that changes, of course, is depending on where I am, that midday break might look a little more glamorous than it is if I'm posting the Tower Bridge in London. It's like, wow, he's, vacationing. I'm not vacationing. It's just a little change of scenery for that midday stuff. But yeah, it's basically, I think the cliche term is slow travel, where it's I'm not 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, setting up shop for a little bit. I get into a routine there, and then I get very antsy and start romanticizing another city, and then I go somewhere else. So, but yeah, I'm in New York now, and we'll be for a little bit.
Is there a lot of pre-planning with even scheduling check-in calls? When all of a
Uh,
sudden you were an hour behind clients, now you're 8 hours ahead.
I would say the biggest thing was Spain specifically, where I was anywhere from 6 to 9 hours ahead of most of my US based clients. But if anything, that gave people one, email wise, I was pretty much ahead of everybody. So they'd
Okay,
always wake up to something in their inbox. And then
that's nice.
check in call wise, yeah, for the most part, it gave people the opportunity to chat with me very early in the day. So I wouldn't say it posed too many issues, if any. It was pretty smooth. And
It
especially
is.
because people know what to expect. So it's not like my time zone is changing every week. It's, hey, I'm going to be in London for the next 6 months. So this is, the flow that we'll get into, and then things change for another meaningful amount of time.
How do you feel living in now one of the worst cities in America?
So I did live here pre-COVID. I loved it then, and I probably would have stayed for a little bit. And then, of course, COVID hit, and I left the city like a lot of people. Coming back now, it's fine. Although I don't know why I didn't think ahead, where I'd say 12 out of the 15 people I spent the most time with left for Florida or Texas, of course.
Yeah.
So
Why would they
now I'm
do that, do you
back.
think? Why do you think they would do that?
No idea.
Daddy, what do we
Specific.
call it? Is it Daddy DeSantis?
Daddy
Yeah.
DeSantis. Apparently, there's already schools, I think, in Texas that are closed. I forget what other state, Kentucky. They've already closed for COVID stuff.
Interesting.
What?
There's already schools that are closing. This
Wait,
shit
COVID's
is
back?
there's a new variant. So the booster the vaccinated people are susceptible to this new deadly strain. The symptoms are cough, upset stomach, shivers.
Sounds like
Massive.
me after a bender over the weekend.
Yes, there's going to be a big push, obviously, for the new updated Premier 2.0 shot that will apparently help with this. And there's schools that are already closed. It's wild.
Don't jinx me with stuff here in New York, because it'll be the strictest here. So
Well, if it's Texas doing it, maybe it'll be opposite day this time.
that'd be
Yeah,
a nice change.
yeah, maybe. Yeah, all the blue states are just going to be like, "Fuck it, we're wide open." Told you we can be cool.
Election year.
I mean, I don't want to obviously go too far down this rabbit hole, but it was quite interesting. Again, the last time I was here when COVID hit, you kind of walk around Times Square. Not that I was doing that every day, but it was an absolute ghost town. It was kind of freaky.
It was like 28 days later.
Yeah,
it was insane.
I mean, yeah, back now. Go ahead, sorry.
So are you going to be in the city now for a while?
Yeah, so my wife took a job at a hotel in Manhattan. So
nice.
Obviously we can't pull the plug on that and bounce around. So we're here until beginning of next year, at which point we will theoretically reassess. But there is a chance that New York is a home base for the foreseeable future, because I obviously don't want to shoot her career aspirations in the foot because I'm getting antsy. So, set up shop here, travel periodically, and we'll see what happens.
When you were traveling, because we do have a lot of folks that do travel, right? And what happens with all of our clients whenever they travel, it's, I can't stick to things and blah, blah, blah. Now, obviously your trips weren't like these 2-week trips where it was more hedonistic and indulgent in nature. It was very much like, I have to recreate a good environment for myself. But since you are so well versed in traveling, what are some tips you can give folks to help themselves stay on track when they are traveling?
What immediately comes to mind on the nutritional side of things first, even with shorter trips, 7 days, 10 days, 14 days, is I think people drastically overestimate how much splurging constantly in a new place adds to the travel experience. So if any of the three of us think about the best trips that we've ever been on, Paris, what was the best meal you had? Maybe you're naming 2 to 3 to 4 total meals. It's not 21 straight benders at a restaurant that are, that trip to Paris was okay, but it would have been way worse if I didn't just stuff myself and drink like crazy the entire time. So I'd say above all else, looking for that point of diminishing returns that tends to happen far sooner than people realize if they're actually looking out for it. And of course, people are afraid of the FOMO thing of, well, I don't want to quote unquote deprive myself while I'm on this trip. You could even start super small and be a little bit moderate on day 3 of the trip and wake up the next morning and see if you legitimately regret not having even more food or more alcohol the night before. And obviously 95% of the time you wake up and say, oh, I like how I feel. I didn't need that whole lot extra. That FOMO thing wasn't really a thing. And I find that when people have more practice and more experience with that morning after feeling of, ooh, this is better, I kind of want to feel like this more often, it gets a lot easier to get away from that constant fear of, if I don't splurge constantly, this trip isn't going to be incredible. That, and I truly think it can actually take away from a trip if you just feel bloated and hungover and lethargic the entire time. To go with this Paris example. Obviously, a lot of people go there and walk 15,000 steps a day when they're typically walking 4,000 to 6,000. You're going to feel pretty awful doing that if all of your meals look a certain type of way and you're drinking at least 2 meals per day. So yeah, I mean, more succinctly, I'd say looking out for that point of diminishing return sooner, and at least giving yourself the opportunity to realize your trip isn't going to be ruined if you don't have bread and pasta for 3 meals in a row. Not that carbs are bad, of course, but just the default things on vacation. every single time.
Why do you hate carbs?
Fattening. It goes
Speaking
straight to
of
your waist.
It's always wild to me when I think with vacation and stuff, it seems to, and I wonder if people from different countries are different, but the go-to is just, I'm going to eat the shittiest deep fried garbage food. Like, you can still go out and enjoy a nice, healthy, well-balanced meal. You're not going to enjoy the deep fried garbage. You're going to enjoy company. So just that, and that's what you're basically talking about. And people can definitely use that reminder. I've been away the last 3 weeks. I think I had pizza once. I had 4 or 5 poke bowls. That was my go-to.
Yeah,
like,
but that's great.
it's slamming. Yeah. And you feel great, but those are great points. Remembering how you feel the next day. That I feel like these are constant conversations at all.
And I think the things that people are afraid of missing out on, for the most part, unless it's the last night of the trip,
Yeah.
if you wake up the next morning and you truly feel like, man, like yesterday would have been a lot better if I had that, put it on your calendar, put it on the itinerary for a day or two from now. Very, very rarely is something that people think every meal during a getaway is truly unique and special. Not really, for the most
No.
part. There's going to be a handful of genuinely special things that are contribute to long lasting memories. But outside of that, like, again, you wake up the next morning, you're like, you know what? Screw what Sam said. I regret not having whatever. Fine, go do it the next night. It's not, for the most part, it's going to be fairly accessible. So I think when people remember that, it gets easier to, God forbid I say sacrifice, but sacrifice in the moment, knowing I can just go back a day or two later. But for the most part, you're going to feel good with that decision.
Man. Do you immediately look for a grocery store or something like that when you're traveling? You're going to be there. Is that one of the first things that you do, or have you already scoped that stuff out?
I think for the most part, try to nail, as cliche as this is, the first meal of the day. So even if I just have a mix of eggs, egg whites, and a little bit of fruit, because if I start the day with croissants and pancakes and whatever, what is the most likely trajectory of that day? Not that you can't be a little bit healthier after that, but it's probably going to spiral. And then if I leave the house ravenous, I just go right to whatever this travel itinerary is, and I don't have anything. You run into that hunger slingshot where it gets pulled back, pulled back, pulled back, and then it's 11:30. All you've had is coffee and a granola bar, and now it's screw whatever advice I've gotten from my nutrition coach. I'm just going to get to the most convenient, appealing thing in the moment, and then you fall into that spiral.
Yeah.
The tough part that I see, and this has kind of been rearing its ugly head in the dieting world, is that folks just aren't using quality foods to fill themselves up with. And I think we're still playing this like macro Tetris, like let me fit it into my plan type of a scenario, as opposed to if you're eating nutrient dense foods, you're going to be fuller. You're going to be more satiated. You're going to have a little bit of a better digestive outcome. You're not going to feel like a fucking bloated mess all day long. So we don't need to fill up on stuff that isn't going to serve us from a micronutrient and a fiber and a protein standpoint. I think we need to be able to actually sit there and evaluate, am I eating X amount of meals per day regularly? If that's the case, great. Then we can just kind of play with what's happening inside the meal. And if I'm not eating XYZ meals about the same times per day, what am I then being susceptible to? Because if I'm not planning ahead for it, like you said, Sam, I'm going to be able to go and just get whatever. And I don't care if you're in fucking Lisbon, Portugal, or if you're in New York City, whatever is never going to be anything good.
It's never going to be good.
Usually. So and people are so afraid of being hungry. Like the human physiology was built for you to be okay. Like body fat is a reason that you will survive being hungry. It's okay to have a little bit of a hunger in your stomach. Like if anything, it's kind of a little bit motivating. But I think people get to this point where they're like, oh, fuck, I'm hungry. Like I just need, it's like, no, you've just been conditioned to know that whatever the fuck you feel like, you can eat.
You have to practice.
Even if you think you're hungry, you go straight to a cupboard, straight to a convenience store without actually sitting and, no pun intended, like digesting it for a second and wait a minute, what am I actually feeling here? And there's a good chance it's actual hunger. And if so, not the end of the world. To steal a line from, I believe his name is Mark Young, hunger is an alert, not an alarm. So it's okay, it's telling me something, but it's not a fire that I need to put out immediately.
How do you deal with that if you have a client that is complaining about always feeling hungry?
First thing I would do is audit every possible thing that we could be doing, every stone that is not currently turned that can get their hunger from let's say they're dieting and they're up at a 7 or 8 out of 10. Is there any low-hanging fruit that can get us down to a 3 or 4 to make it more tolerable? One, as an aside, I will communicate in advance, hey, there's really no total workaround for hunger when you're in a deficit. If anything, if you're never hungry, that's probably a sign that you're not in a deficit.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you just go through the simplest checklist of, are you getting plenty of protein? Are you getting plenty of fiber? Is most of that coming from minimally processed nutrient dense foods, and not, no offense to them, but Kodiak cake pancakes and high fiber this, like,
I'm with you, man. Fuck those foods. I'm
yeah,
done with
which,
that shit.
yeah, I've been a lot, I don't want to say harsher on those, but for sure. So we look at, are you getting adequate protein? Are you getting adequate fiber? Are you hydrating well? Although I don't like drinking more water is the cure all for everything, because I think that comes up quite a bit. It's like, are you hungry? Well, just keep chugging water. I'm like, has some value, but it's not the cure all. And then I think another thing is actually, it's so easy to get caught up in the numbers of, okay, what are your macros? What are your calories? Are you getting enough protein, fiber? And again, that's important. But even meal timing, I think for so long, I got caught in the cycle of, it doesn't matter when you eat, as long as you check these numerical boxes by the end of the day. And that might be true, again, from a numerical perspective. But in practice, if your protein minimum is 120 grams and you're having 17 grams at breakfast, it's no wonder that you feel like you need a mid-morning snack every single day and you're completely ravenous by the time you get home from work. So I think that's another undervalued thing from a hunger management perspective, is putting a little bit more emphasis on meal timing. And to go back to this travel scenario, especially when you're traveling, a line I stole from somebody fairly recently, I wish I could remember her name, was how important it is to play the tape forward. So if you're walking out of the house in the morning, you've had no protein, you've had no fruits, you've had no vegetables, you're barely hydrated, it's just caffeine, whatever. What is the most likely outcome 4 hours from now? To the point we already made, you're not going to make a great decision. So a lot of times I think meal timing specifically, and thinking ahead to the most likely outcomes, if you're making the decisions you are, is something that is undervalued when we're focusing so exclusively on the numbers.
I like it. I wanted to ask you your recent post, because this is something that I feel like I've posted a decent amount about, of, do you really know what you want? And you have this post, tons of people have contradicting goals and desires and don't realize it. Can you talk about that?
I know that's a pinned post to the top of my page. I think.
Oh, okay. It's not recent. Yeah, I didn't notice it's pinned.
Can you give me a quick refresher? If you give me one or two of the points, I'll be able to touch upon it.
I can't. Well, I'd have to pull it up on my phone, unless this thing lets me log
something
in.
that immediately comes to
Even
mind.
just the idea of that, of we have contradicting goals and desires. What comes to mind for you first?
The immediate thing, say somebody, actually, here's a great example that obviously we all see all the time, which is somebody who insists that calorie counting takes too long and they don't have time to use a food scale, and they're obsessed with getting results as quickly as humanly possible, but they're also unwilling to do the things that would accelerate a dieting timeline, like being more in touch with the numbers and being in touch with the data. Or somebody who says, I get really bored eating the same things over and over. I'm like, okay, you just have to put a little bit more work into planning these meals in advance, doing a little bit of that macronutrient Tetris, cooking a little bit more. Well, I don't really like cooking very often. I'm like, okay, so a recurring theme is there's no door number 3. And I think a lot of people reject door number 1, they reject door number 2, and they're like, well, this thing over here, can I still do this and get the results that I want? I'm like, there has to be a trade-off somewhere. Another common example would be, high protein snacks. That comes up all the time. And it's like, okay, you can ideally bulk or cook some protein sources in bulk in advance, and you can do that. Well, I don't really like leftovers. It's like, okay, well, you can cook things on the fly if you really want to. Well, I don't have time for that. And then door number 3 is these magical high protein snacks that don't really exist. So that's definitely something, again, I forget when I originally put out that post, but it's a very frequent.
It was like over a year ago.
Over a year
ago. So you had the white background. I didn't notice the pin.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, those were some of the examples that you did have in the swipe through.
Perfect.
With that kind of stuff. I wish I had more energy in the morning, but I like to watch Netflix at night.
Yeah.
Things like that. When I
need my glass of wine to unwind, which has this time and place, but then you're waking up every morning. I hit snooze. I can't help it. Like, well, you can, just you got to pick door number 1, door number 2. I can't create this third door that doesn't exist.
Yeah. I recently talked about people say that they want something in this field, especially in health, nutrition, fitness. They say they want that body. but there's no desire to do the actual stuff. But when you're going to college, hey, I want to get this degree, like it's 4 years. There's going to be work. Nobody's like, oh, I want to be a doctor, but like, why can't I just be a doctor? Like they want that work that's going to take to get there. But for whatever reason, in this
Huberman
space,
did it.
they ignore the fact that there's going to be sacrifices, that there's going to be things like that. And I think a lot of people get conflicted on what they want. They want the body and they want that lifestyle and they want that whatever, but then they want to be the person who's out partying, having fun, eating out all the time. It's like, well, what do you really want? You can't have both, especially at the beginning, So I don't know. That's what that kind of made me think of.
Sorry, the doctor example you give. Hear me okay?
Yeah. I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Never mind. Something happened on my end.
Okay,
I apologize.
but,
we'll leave that in.
No, I like the doctor example you gave. And honestly, any parallel we can draw to non-fitness stuff, because obviously it's so common for people to, 21-day fix, 6-week reset, all these things. And we just accept it for what it is in health and fitness. But imagine I said, okay, I want to be a doctor of physical therapy, but studying takes too long. My options would be not being a doctor of physical therapy or just fucking studying more. I'm like, is there another option where like I don't really have time to study? And we're laughing at that because it sounds so ridiculous, but with health and fitness specifically, and I think, obviously personal responsibility. I think some of it falls in the fitness industry for just marketing the shit out of these very misleading things that prey on people's impatience. But to go back to that point, there is personal responsibility. And if the last 275 times you tried to accelerate, whatever this little makeover or transformation is, that is probably 10 to 20 to 30 years of bad habits in the making. It didn't work out. Perhaps this time we entertain one of those two doors, even if one of them sucks a little bit, because it probably sucks a lot less than being in the same exact spot another 12 to 18 to 24 months from now, never mind 5 to 10 years from now, when like the cost of inaction gets more costly. Like you end up in a worse and worse spot with a bigger and bigger mountain to climb if you don't do it, quote unquote, the right way in the short term.
The thing that I
find dull pain that people tolerate.
Oh, exactly. I was just talking about this yesterday with my clients on a group call yesterday. I was just talking about like people have so much resilience to feeling like shit. Like, I mean, I have a buddy back home who's probably one of the most unhealthy human beings on the planet.
Loser.
And he like every week it's like gout or diverticulitis, or he's got some other ailment. And I'm like, dude, you're like a fucking old Honda that just keeps I don't even want to say Honda because Hondas don't break down. I don't know. What's a car that breaks down all the time? A fucking Dodge Neon. Like, but he's breaking down on a weekly basis. And then he takes a look. I mean, and he's very aware. He's like, I drink every day. I smoke cigarettes. I chew tobacco. I eat like shit. I don't sleep. I do blow. And like, that's just how he lives his life.
That's a Tuesday morning before noon.
Right. Exactly. For all of us. But there's no wonder, but the tolerance for feeling like that is so high. Can you imagine if you took all that tolerance that you've had for 20 years of looking at yourself in the mirror, not liking what you see, giving yourself the same bullshit story, waking up uncomfortable, going to bed uncomfortable, take all of that resilience and push it into 365 days of 90% compliance to a reasonable plan? What the fuck would happen to you? You would look completely unrecognizable and you would feel the best you've ever felt. But it's going to take you a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of tries into this idea of having to start something that you don't think you're capable of because you've already shown yourself that you're not, because you quit at every first sign of resistance. But it's like failure training. Like I always tell my clients, like when you first hit that first sign of resistance, keep trying to push it a little harder. You're not going to fucking break your body. Like there's heroin addicts that live for 50 years that don't die. Fucking everybody on Skid Row. There's people that are 90 years old that are still homeless, that have been homeless for 50 years. They're not dead yet. So the human body can handle a lot. You're just not willing to be uncomfortable. And that's why you're in the position that you're in.
And I do think most people tap out before when they experience that discomfort, a little bit of friction, before they see the tangible ROI. So to use the classic example of, somebody who's running in place, who doesn't get to, like, physically, like in the real world, out in the street, just running in place, you're expending all the effort and there's all that discomfort of exerting yourself, but you don't get to see the ROI of at least a change of scenery, because you're like, okay, this sucks. My lungs are on fire, my legs hurt, but this is really pretty. Like, okay, I can tolerate this. I can keep going. And people do that in the dieting space all the time, where they sacrifice semi-sporadically for a marginal amount of time. They experience all that discomfort, they look down and they're still, I still kind of feel like shit and I don't really see any change. So then they quit. And again, that gives you a bigger mountain the next time you go to give it another go. And it's over and over. I don't know if you guys know it's like a pretty popular viral image of it's two miners, one directly on top of the other.
Just gonna say this
oh,
as
really?
the example. Yeah, like they're just right there. And he's like, screw this. I'm never finding the gold. And
exactly,
it's a cross section. And you see it's like two whatever pick.
Yeah, I think I was gonna say ice pick. It's not ice, but yeah,
it's a pickaxe.
Pickaxe. That's it.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's a pickaxe, and you have this visual, and you're like, dude, a little fucking longer, and you're gonna get to the diamonds on the other side.
Yep.
He already has the pickaxe on his shoulder. He's hanging his head and walking home. And I think that's most people's a really good visual of most people's average attempt at trying to change their lives. They put in enough effort to feel like this kind of sucks. I don't really like this, but it's such a sporadic effort. And again, it's a marginal amount of time. In keeping in mind that 3 months is still somewhat marginal. Like most people's overhauls take 6 to 12 plus months, right? So
if not longer, I mean,
yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we think about things in such, and again, maybe chalk some of this up to fitness marketing, because very few people are like, join my 18-month slow and sustainable program.
I had a fucking post a few years ago, like on New Year's Eve or whenever it was around New Year's. It was like, sign up for my 365-day instant transformation challenge. And it was like that whole idea, something like that, just calling it out. But I think it takes people like us and the people that we have on here and the coaches that we probably follow and know to be talking about. I mean, people need to understand this is just, it's a new life. Yeah. This is forever. Even when you actually do get to the physique goal, or like, I'm finally good at meal prep, you don't stop meal prepping. Finally, I figured it out, and then go back. There is no going back. It is a forever thing. And even the idea, I feel like I have to talk about this a handful of times, because I think people struggle with, how come it's still hard for me? And I'm like, this could be a struggle for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
I'm never going to just naturally control what I eat. I have to pay attention. I don't want to go lift, but I know how I feel after, which goes to the point about how you feel after when you eat on a vacation. It could potentially be a lifelong struggle. And I think people need to accept that, and they look at people and think it's easy for them, or they're just into it. But most people that do this aren't as into it in terms of like, yay, it's meal prep Sunday.
I know.
Well, it's also a lot easier to be compliant when there's a very promised tangible outcome. That's what I think we've all seen our clients do really, really well at a dieting phase, and then they're fucking disasters in a maintenance phase, because maintenance doesn't promise much, right? Maintenance is kind of like, like, okay, yeah, I'm playing with variables, I'm dialing in training intensity, I'm cleaning up food quality here and there, I'm working on sleep, I'm working on steps, I'm working on hydration, meal timing, all this shit that's boring, but nothing's really changing at this rapid rate. Whereas like, I'm losing a quarter of a pound or half a pound a week. This is amazing. Yeah, but I bet if you fucking paid attention to maintenance the same way you did a diet, you wouldn't have to fucking diet as many times.
Big time. And actually, to go back to the example of one, I love that we're saying this might be hard forever, because I think that is also the least marketable thing. Hey, try my 365-day instant program. Yeah, right. this lifelong thing. It'll probably take you a couple of years to get the hang of this, and it'll probably be somewhat hard for the rest of your life. Nobody's buying that. But people, of course, they need to hear that. But the example I always use when this comes up in terms of the permanent lifestyle change is actually my very own mother. She did a group coaching program of mine, this maybe 6 years ago now. And bear with me, this is going to sound harsh, I didn't want to let her into the group, because I'm like, you're not going to listen to anything I say. It's just going to be, it's just Sam. It's just Sam. Like, you'd be better off with somebody else.
You made her pay, right?
Say it again.
You made her pay, right?
Yeah, of
Gosh.
course. A premium.
Yeah. Come on.
Jack that rate up on
They
mom.
needed some
Yeah.
skin in the game. But she was persistent, and I let her in the group. And I mean, she's comfortable with me talking about this. At the time, her diet would have, one of her first jobs growing up was in a bakery. So she had spent a lot of time in the kitchen,
Oh God.
making a lot of good. I mean, made some incredible stuff. There were a lot of bagels, a lot of cereal, steak and cheese, hot dogs. And these are still things that she has in moderation, but she buckled up very much at that time. Like, hey, I'm going to have to leave all this stuff mostly in the dust most of the time. And to make a very long story short, she lost, I think it was around 70 pounds over the next, it was like a year and a half, 2 years. So a lot of people were like, Mary, what's your secret? And she basically was like, I didn't freak the fuck out when I was losing 0.4 pounds per week, because I knew if I just keep chipping away at this, I'll be in a much better spot. Fast forward again to this past weekend. I played tennis with my wife, my sister, and my mom, who is now in her 60s. And I mean this in a very nice, positive way. I had no concerns about my 60-something-year-old mother running around the court hitting a tennis ball because of the shape that she's kept herself in, because she has maintained, I'd say 85 to 90% of the habits that brought her that weight loss in the first place. Obviously, has a little bit more nutritional flexibility now, but she is fundamentally a different person. When she goes on little trips like this, say to visit my sister, she packs a bunch of food. She talks to my sister in advance to see, when are we going to get some steps in? Can we walk the dog while I'm there? Do you have some dumbbells at your condo that we can use? These are things that are never going to change for the rest of her life. And again, this doesn't make for a good tagline on a marketing for a program or something, but people still ask her, like, what's your secret? How'd you keep it off? And then she tells them, and it's like, they go back to that door number 3. Is there another option besides paying attention for fucking ever? No, not really.
There is another option. It's door number 3, and door number 3 is going to lead you back to the 1 and 2 at some point, because you're going to walk through it. You're going to realize you're the asshole that's standing there by yourself again. And it's going to be this frustrating loop that just keeps playing and playing and playing over and over again, until you finally get to a point that you're either frustrated to the point where you do it the right way, or you give up altogether. And now you're just going to have that, this never works, and this, why bother? And I always ask people, like, what the fuck else are you going to do with your time? Like, at some point, your kids will be out of the house. You'll have all the time in the world. Your friends won't want to fucking see you every weekend anymore. So you're going to have weekends free. So now what? So now you're 50, you're 60, you got 20 or 30 good years left. What do you want those years to look like? Because everybody's like looking at like, well, I'm 25 or I'm 40 or I'm 30. I'm not really worried about menopause yet, or I'm not worried about what's going to happen when I'm 70. I didn't either at 25, but at 40, I'm thinking about it, because I mean, I see people my age already fucking degraded, can't get out of chairs, can't enjoy hikes, can't play with their kids, can't do the stuff that they used to do in their 20s. And what do? They blame age. Well, it's just part. Like, Jimmy talks about this all the time. Like, oh, it's just 40. It's like, no, it's not.
Yeah, it's what doctors will tell you. Welcome to farm. I'm 44 years old. I know you're shocked. I look unbelievable, but it's
TRT.
I want you to. This is a safe space, Sam, where you can be as angry or say things the way you're feeling it in your heart.
Yeah.
To either coaches or the people that keep getting in their own way. You can pick which one, and you don't have to say it nice. I know I'm throwing this out there. How would you say to either coaches, totally separate topic, or the people who keep getting in their own way, what the fucking problem is? Coaches like the shitty coaches that we were talking about earlier. That's it's not a marketable thing. The charlatans.
Oh, there's so many directions I want to take this. To clarify, the things that people would need to hear the most to keep finding themselves in the cycle.
Yeah, we keep saying things in a nice way,
In the
but in your internal dialogue, it sounds different.
In the intuitive eating world space way, you know that world, the one where it's okay to be body positive when your fucking HbA1c is 9.
I know.
This is a place where you might not put it on your Instagram because you don't know how people will receive it. This is a safe place for you to let it out.
I mean, going back a little bit of context, and we talked about this, of course, prior to hitting record, that I did slip into, I say a little bit, but a very heavy amount of censoring the shit out of myself and what I really thought. And it got so exhausting where I had my real thoughts. So there was the real Sam, that would talk to you prior to hitting record on something like this. And then I would almost get into character when I was with my clients or when I was doing a podcast, where all of my messaging was, if you fell quote unquote off track for the 400th weekend in a row, it's okay. At least you thought about maybe trying a little bit, and that's okay. And we'll just try again next week. And I don't know if you guys know Dr. Amelia Thompson, but I saw her put out a post one time saying, you know, we're so hesitant to crack the whip on our clients because we're afraid that we'll be considered shamey or not compassionate or whatever the case is. And she pointed out, and I don't know why this took, and there were a few other things at the time, but this post immediately comes to mind. I don't know why such an obvious statement hit me so hard, where it's actually the opposite of compassionate to not let your client is coming to you for a result. And if you're letting them off the fucking hook week after week after week after month, it's okay. We'll just try again next week. It's okay. You're not even trying in the first place. So it's actually the exact opposite of compassionate to let somebody invest in you for 3 to 6 to 12 plus months, and they're in the same exact spot. And then another phrase that comes to mind is dishonesty is a disservice. So again, I don't know if it was maybe a year or two ago now, where I'm like, you know what, I'm tired of playing this character of super nice, and not that I'm a dick now, I'd like to think not, but you know, this like super nice, super positive, it's okay, it's
the
okay.
The Andrew Dice Clay of fitness over here.
I'm not. So I just got to the point where I'm like, this is actually the exact opposite of what I'm trying to be. And I'm going to use all the dirty little words that I'm not supposed to, like sacrifice and restraint and strict and all these things where I'm like, like, am I allowed to say that? Is that okay? Or are people going to get mad at me and call me shamey? But for every 3 people who read a post that I put out about something like that, or every client, that it does sting a little bit. Maybe if I crack the whip, there's another 97 people. Maybe I'm blowing this out of proportion ratio wise, but you know, another 97 people.
I don't disagree.
Who were like, okay, that's not ideal. It kind of sucks to hear, but I appreciate you treating me like an adult, being honest with me. And now I can actually do something with this information. So yeah, that's been a huge shift, is not being in character when I'm putting out content, when I'm on a podcast, when I'm doing coaching. And like I said, for the little bit of sting, I think anything else is doing people a disservice to act like yet another week of complacency is something that's going to serve them.
Assume that the client that you're about to talk about is listening. What would be something where, because there's a handful of different topics and we kind of touched on them, whether it's weekends or prepping or whatever it might be, what would be the one thing that gets you so frustrated that a client continues to repeat is complaining they're not?
Meal planning immediately comes to mind, because I have now been coaching for over 10 years. I have reviewed thousands and thousands and thousands of food logs. And that sounds like almost hyperbole for me to say thousands, but quite literally just scrolling through my
7 days a week.
Yeah, literally just looking at food logs. And actually, food log, we'll save that, like food log reviews and stuff, I think that's a separate topic, but just looking for commonalities in the clients who succeed. And with very few exceptions, the people who wake up with a clear path to success are the people who do well. And I don't know if that just sounds boring or too elementary or whatever the case is, but I scream this from the rooftops. Hey, look back at the last 200 weekends that you woke up with zero semblance of a plan, that you did not think ahead to potential obstacles, that you did not have some low friction, healthy stuff in your fridge. How did those weekends go? Oh yeah, on Monday you were complaining that the scale is up again, but you did quite literally nothing different from any of these previous weekends. And the thing I think that really fires me up about meal planning specifically is, beyond the initial learning curve, it is such a low effort, low committal thing when you look at the bandwidth required, assuming people aren't on Pinterest with these 17 ingredient recipes.
That drives me fucking crazy. It's like you don't need to be a gourmet chef to do this stuff, folks.
Not at all. Not at all.
You don't need to be like a 4-star.
That's one of the, sorry to cut you off. Go
ahead.
No,
you're right.
I actually think, semi-related side tangent here, that's one of the most underrated, and this will sound obvious to you guys, but I think a lot of people need to hear this. One of the most underrated weight loss and weight management skills is being a less shitty cook. Because if I say, oh, you need to cook more of your own meals, and you instantly think of this dry, not really well seasoned chicken, it's no wonder that you're defaulting to takeout and meals out every single weekend. Where there are meal, I'm not a great cook, by the way, but there are things that I make on a weekly basis that I do really enjoy. I've made them enough times where they're anywhere from tolerable to pretty good, which makes it a lot easier for me to be consistent compared to, say, my cooking skills, I don't know, 5 to 10 years ago wouldn't have been that great. But yeah, I'd say meal planning specifically, because if you do it the right way, which is keeping things very, very simple, mostly single ingredient stuff that you can plug and play, a fairly small-ish weekly rotation of meals, not blowing things up every single week, Googling recipe. You don't need more fucking recipe ideas. You need to do something with the existing knowledge you have. And even recipe, like the idea of meal prep and recipes, I think is so or let me rephrase that. Clearly I'm getting fired up. I have so many thoughts right now.
I like it.
Good, let's go.
Meal prep and recipe stuff, I think, does people a disservice because it does feel way more complex than it needs to be. I think a phrase that's starting to catch a little bit more now that I really like is ingredient prep. So picture almost like you're walking into a Chipotle and there are these set things that you can plug and play based on what you want that day. So they have some carb sources, right? They have white rice, they have brown rice, they have beans, they have a couple of vegetables, the fajita stuff that you can throw on. There are different protein sources. And every time you walk in a Chipotle, the foundation is the same for the available menu items, but you just adjust those. So if you're somebody who's kind of in the middle of, well, I don't want to eat the same thing every day, but you're also somebody who's like, I don't want to do this macro math every single night and go to these recipe blogs and try to plug stuff in and turn meal planning into a 30-minute process, then your solution is kind of that ingredient prep where it's, let me get 2 to 3 proteins, 2 to 3 carbs, maybe 2 to 3 fats. And then when I'm meal planning, again, to go back to pre-tangent, what I had actually started with, to go back to meal planning specifically, now it's a lot easier. And I often compare this to, let's say you have a financial budget every single month where I can spend this much. Picture how difficult that would be to stick to if on a monthly basis you changed your internet provider, you started paying a different property management group for your apartment, or switched who you had your mortgage with, you switched, whatever the utility. Picture changing that stuff every month. That is so mentally exhausting. And I say that and it sounds ridiculous, but people do that with meal planning. They have their budget, right? Their numerical stuff that they can work with. But for whatever reason, they switch up those budget items all the time and they wonder why they fizzle out with meal planning. So yeah, clearly I would say meal planning is the big one because it's so low effort.
Especially now, think about it. We have, like, just last night, by the way, I didn't realize that this can happen. I didn't realize that my Instapot had a rice setting on it. And then I realized that there was a rice button. So 12 minutes it took me to make rice yesterday. So I made 4 containers of jasmine rice. It took me 45 minutes to bake, which I mean, and when you say 45 minutes, it's not like I'm standing in front of the oven and micromanaging.
It's like if you're like, oh, I got to do laundry.
Like you have to put something
sitting
into
there
a hole
for an hour.
You put something into a hole.
It sits for another hour.
You stick it into a hole, you close the hole, and then the thing inside the hole, the gnomes,
does the work.
The gnomes do whatever they got to do, and then you pull it out. The folding part sucks, and it always sucks, and then it eats some socks here and there. But still, these machines that we have that are doing this work, cooking rice in 12 minutes, baking potatoes in 45 minutes, browning beef for 9 minutes.
Steamer bags. Even just
the steam in a bag vegetables, are those good for you? It's like, why the fuck would they be bad for you? Why? Because they're not coming off actually, they're probably better for you because they're picking them ripe and freezing them immediately. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I would actually argue,
even like the people that's so much cleanup, get the catering pans, cook the stuff in a catering pan, steamer bag your veggies and potatoes and things like that. You throw everything out. Yeah. Have you heard of the book Cook Once, Eat All Week?
I don't think so.
Yeah. So you just described that book. Cook once, eat all week. I was recommended to me. I got it. I never used it, but what it is, because I'm like, this is too much work. I put the same seasoning on steak, chicken, whatever. I cook it up. You find a good seasoning, smoky barbecue or whatever. Yeah. Who cares? And I'm good to go. But so it's exactly that. So anybody who just listened to everything that Sam just described, and you're looking for some guidance with something like that, the book Cook Once, Eat All Week, it's that you're cooking all these ingredients, and then there's these recipe pages showing what you can make with those ingredients to get some variety.
That's great. And actually, if I can add one more thing to this topic,
no.
Yeah, okay. I think that's something else that makes meal planning much higher friction than it needs to be, is people's constant pursuit of, I'm saying new recipes, but also foods that don't exist. And what I mean by that is, if you Googled what are the best sources of protein 10 years ago, you would have found chicken, egg whites, whey protein, tuna, shrimp, lean ground beef, lean ground turkey, whatever. If you Google that today, you will find the same things. So your available options don't really change. And I know everybody likes to look for, again, the high protein pancakes, the Kodiak stuff, and they want high protein snacks, this, at the other. But like the reasonable rotation of, in this case, let's say really good protein options for what people will realistically have on a weekly basis is maybe 5 to 8. Even that's probably generous.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
That's even a lot.
I'm trying to be really generous here for the
Poultry,
meal variety
steak, seafood.
You're looking
eggs,
at
egg
maybe
whites.
5 primary protein sources. Maybe is a better number throughout
Greek
the week.
yogurt.
And I'm gonna put this concept to bed. Eggs are not a good source of protein.
True. That's another meal planning rabbit hole they could go down.
Eggs and peanut butter are about the same as far as protein. They are. That's
in terms of if it's the whole egg with the yolk,
right?
Protein to calories wise.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we're looking at mostly, obviously, you guys.
Yeah, because what do we always get? I had two hard boiled eggs, an apple, and a cup of coffee for breakfast, which means you had
peanut butter on it or something. Like
you
that.
you had 15 grams of carbs, you had 12 grams of fat, and you had 10 grams of protein. So you were actually net carb and fat heavy. You were protein poor. You had no liquid that was other than coffee. But this is how people live. Like a buddy, the same buddy I was telling you that was unhealthy.
Poor guy's getting crucified today.
Fuck him.
That guy.
He owes me money anyway. So his sister actually reached out the other day in desperation. This is how it always works, right? Somebody sees a post of yours, because our posts always provoke thought. And I think what happens is they get fired up in the moment. They're like, oh, Sam saw me and he heard me and I have to reach out. And it comes at you with this level of panic of like, I've been doing this. And then you just get like the kitchen sink spilled at you. And what you always hear is you hear a lot of stuff, but nothing actually happened. I've tried this, and this. This is how I am. No actual awareness of how they eat. No semblance of an actual workout program. Chaos for the last 10 or 15 years. And this is what most average general population folks are doing. They have no idea how much they're eating, right? It's like, well, I eat this for breakfast, then nothing happens. Then I eat this for dinner. And then I overeat on this stuff at night because I don't really, but there's no quantification of it. So because calories aren't real, right? It's just insulin resistance and hormones that are making you fat. So there's still this fundamental disbelief that like the currency that we're talking about when it comes to food, which is calories, they're just real. I'm sorry. Like, I don't want to keep like having to hammer home like the law of thermodynamics, but it's a real thing. So I think for us, like, how do you help reframe folks to understand that it's a lack of awareness? And until you start to create some level of awareness, you're going to continuously be lost.
To go back to that financial analogy, if you look at the way most people assess their decision making, it would be the equivalent of if I was complaining that I couldn't get out of debt and you were my financial advisor and you asked how the last month went. And I said, well, I bought a new watch and I bought sneakers. And you're like, Sam, hold on, how fucking much were these things? I'm like, I don't know, but I'm sure it was a pretty good deal. And then I bought whatever. It's like,
and it's always that brush over.
Yeah.
It just gets brushed over.
How's your diet this past week? Pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty good. I feel like I barely ate. And it's like, okay, we have ideally at least a little bit of data. So we have data that suggests that is not actually the case. So of course, I don't want to attack anybody and be like, you're a fucking liar and you're slamming donuts tonight. Because a lot of times, I mean, it's a mix of a lack of effort and ignorance, which I don't say in a harsh way, just truly, the skill of tracking. I did not realize how many calories I wasn't actually eating. But I think if we just go back to, allowing somebody to come to their own conclusion and say, okay, you're telling me you've tried this, and this. How has that been working for you so far? Clearly not well. That's why we're having this conversation. Are you open to the idea of putting both feet in this precision door? Because as we all know, weight loss, unfortunately, doesn't come down to how mindful you are and how healthy you eat. I wish it could be that ambiguous, but it's not. It's a numerical thing, especially, we could give 1,000 examples, somebody who's less active or a woman or somebody who's on the more petite side, that precision dial has to get turned up. So actually, to go back even further to that minor example we gave, I think just if we can create a little bit of buy-in to get somebody to just break through to get to the other side and go, ooh, I see one diamond. I wonder what else is behind there, and see that tangible result from it. It gets a lot easier to have that buy-in. But again, I think just pointing at, okay, you're telling me you tried this, this, and this. None of those have been precise. How has that been working for you? Are you open to something different? And then framing the data, because I think a lot of people hear calorie counting, food scale tracking, they instantly think restrict. And I see this all the time with new clients where the second they start tracking, they eliminate everything they love from their diet. So I think also reminding people, hey, we're just looking to gather data. I mean, we want to make better choices, of course, but we're looking to gather data here. Calorie counting does not have to be synonymous with eating chicken and rice at every single meal. So I think that can also be a weight off people's shoulders and create a little bit more buy-in where, oh, okay, if I start meal planning, I can plan to have, I don't know, like a cookie tomorrow. Like that's okay in moderation. That's fine. And that allows people to not think of it as such a scary thing, to be more precise.
And it'll also show people too. Just one.
I have an amazing point. You piece of shit.
No, you don't. You have a bunch in.
I have to try to remember if you're when the things I love, they cut out the things I love. That's my question. Go ahead.
Well, because what Sam was saying about the cookie thing, like I love crumble, but if I have one crumble cookie, that takes 840 calories of other food out of my day. And this is what people don't realize is how fast some of these indulgences that we like tap into our budget. And unfortunately, most people are not walking around 12% body fat, full of muscle. So they don't have the caloric tolerance that some people like us may have, where if we can have some of these indulgences sporadically planned strategically throughout our week, it doesn't create this massive overage of calories.
And even if it didn't hit your calories, you could go 800, you could hit your macros calories and then go still have that cookie for 800 calories, go 800 over, and you're still fine.
Yeah,
for life. If you're doing that, in terms of a 3,500 calorie deficit that somebody's trying to be in a week, and you have that one cookie, and now, hey, I'm in a 2,700 calorie deficit, you're still making progress.
Right.
But exactly. the idea, for some reason, we know that we have to cut out things that we love. I feel like in every other aspect of our life. I love crystal meth. I don't want to quit it, but I also want to keep my teeth and not pick scabs off my face. So you might love that thing. You have to give it up. You love paying for prostitutes. Well, you're running out of money. You got STDs. You might have to cut out some things that you love. And we seem to get this in every area of life, except for this, where it's this anti-diet culture. The diet culture thing is so confusing now. But yeah, you might have to cut out some things that you love. The things that you love are the things that got you in trouble anyway.
And I would actually argue to some degree that they can be more enjoyable when they're less of a commodity. Now, I
look up the definition of a treat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's not every day.
I think we can go too far in that direction and have this kind of half-assed cheat day thing where we put things on too much of a pedestal. So of course, somewhere in the middle of those two, where it's a commodity, snacking every night before bed, and it becomes an afterthought to snacks are bad. I'm never, ever going to have it. And then when you do, you snap and go crazy. So I think somewhere in the middle, oh man, I just lost my train of thought. I had something else there. Either of you feel free.
And sometimes you have to go through just a period of time where you're cutting it out.
I got it.
To know, like, hey, I don't need this. And then you can introduce it. People seem to think when you are cutting these things out that you love, some people, they can moderate right off the bat. Some people can't. So you eliminate these things and then you can start to bring them back into your life. Things don't have to be forever, even though this lifestyle is forever.
Great point. Yeah, so I remembered my original thought that I just lost my train of thought. So actually now I don't want to forget both of these thoughts. So I'm going to tackle that one first, and then I'm going to add to what you just said. I think another thing that can make it really just significantly easier to give these things up. Again, it's like crazy that I'm hesitant to say that expression, but give these things up or have them a bit less often, is thinking of all the things you're getting in return. The tricky part here is a lot of those things are a little bit delayed. If I have a cookie, I get that immediate satisfaction of the cookie. Whereas if I don't, because I want my weekly deficit to be bigger, that feels a little less tangible and I don't get that ROI right away. But I find that most people, when they think about the idea of sacrifice, let's say I'm not going to have cookies 4 nights a week before bed. It's, oh man, like I'm missing out. I'm restricting myself. I'm depriving myself. What are you getting in return? Maybe you actually wake up with a little more energy in the morning because you're not so bloated and lethargic. You make more progress on a weekly basis. Of course, a lot of your nutrition habits spill over into workout performance and workout consistency, maybe higher sleep quality. So if you actually list these things side by side, like, yes, you're making a sacrifice. I don't get this cookie tonight. And then if you look at all the things you get in return, not from just that one cookie, but from consistently making decisions like that, in many cases, it's actually a significantly longer, more meaningful list. Then, of course, it's just the delayed gratification thing. But I also find that makes a big difference, is not ending the conversation with what you have to give up or cut back on, so you can X, Y, and Z. Like, oh, okay. It's almost like somebody dangling that carrot in front of you, or okay, it's going to be a little bit later, but I get to have that thing.
Hey, we're cutting out all these cookies so you can see your dick when you look down in 6 months.
Yep.
Would that be a good?
Still can't. Six.
No matter how lean you get, Aram, it's still tough to see that.
I got four.
Trim the
four
bush
and a
down
half,
a little bit. He's very bushy.
4.5 abs right now, and I still can't. It's just feet. I look down and I just see feet. I have an innie. What can I say? Sam, we have mostly female listeners, and this is the type of banter that they come back for.
They enjoy it.
Right.
Enjoy it.
Yeah, you have to deprecate your genitalia on the show.
Actually, I have a random belly button thing. You said you have an innie?
Yeah,
his wiener's the innie.
It's really
That's what he was talking about.
It's a penile innie.
I do have an
so
innie belly button.
My story is out in left field. Then I was talking about an actual belly button thing, but unrelated to nutrition and penile stuff. I'm a twin, and it's very, very common. This is just a random fun fact.
Identical or fraternal?
Fraternal.
Okay,
and it's
not as fun.
Say it again.
Not as fun.
Yeah, no. Well, you'd be surprised. People still get us confused, and we look nothing alike. And you'd think my tattoos would give it away, but people still botch it. And it's very common for twins to have slightly different belly buttons. And even actually, there are times where a baby will get tattooed, just like a little dot in the bottom of their foot, in case there are medical things. And like a medication, you need to easily tell the twins apart. They'll cut the umbilical cord just slightly differently, so there's that clear distinction. Or you can go the tattoo route, which I wish my mom gave me a tattoo.
That would have been sick.
That would have been so. Even just a dot, just so I'd be in elementary school and be like, "Hey guys,"
just like puts it right there instead of a teardrop.
Is that what Lil Wayne got the fraternal twin tattoo?
Yeah, but again, nothing to do with anything. That just
no, like it.
That's actually an interesting point. Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably what my Moyle did, and he's like, "We're not going to take the entire foreskin. We're going to leave some of it on."
It was a new doctor. He didn't understand what circumcision was.
Yeah, well, he was
like castration.
Like,
castration. Yeah. Yes.
It was 50% off, half off that day. I don't know why that joke's always
sounds like he gave you 100% off from what I hear.
Yeah, well, listen, it gets cold sometimes, and I keep the hood on.
Well, I think that everything that you were just saying with the sacrifice and that reminder of what you're getting out of it, and then also people need to be celebrating their actions and not just those results. And I feel like you guys probably both the same thing. The people who are regularly celebrating the action wins, not the result wins, are the ones who get the best results.
100%.
I mean, I don't think that's even you can't even deny. The people I hear from on a daily basis who text me about how proud of their decision making they are the ones who always do well in my program. And the people that I don't hear about ever until it's a problem are the ones who always churn and burn after 90 days. Almost every single time. I mean, the amount of data I have on that now at this point is just irrefutable.
Yeah.
And what I always encourage all my clients to do is, people have a sense of shame or guilt when they start disconnecting and not doing the things that they need to do. And that's when they don't lean into coaching and they kind of almost pull away from it. Yep. Whereas I know for coaches like us who are always available, who are here to help, who aren't just fucking using this as a paycheck, who are doing this the right way. Folks, if you're listening to this and you have a coach, lean into the coach when your days suck. Let them text them.
Yeah,
Shoot
I'm
them
a fucking
message.
mess. Just text. I'm a mess.
Yeah, like listen, I had a
shit
shit day, or I'm having a shitty day. I want to be able to just vent and get that out there, because I promise you, if you can get that stuff out and you get comfortable with asking for help and you get comfortable with making the awareness level, hey, I'm not having a good day. I have a support system. I'm going to lean into that support system. Like, if I don't hear from you, I'm going to assume that things are fine. And I can't constantly proactively be reaching out to you to make sure that you're fine. So if you're not fine, whether you have a coach or not, there's other people in your life that are probably supporting you to some extent. Use that support system and lean on your support system and your network and your community. And if you're a coach, if you have a coach, good. Use those tools that you're either paying for or have, because it's going to make things way less daunting.
Yeah, I put a post about this yesterday. That exact scenario, somebody shying away from checking in with their coach because they feel like they've been quote unquote off track. But I'd venture to say, maybe this is generous too. Most coaches at this point, again, maybe this is generous, do not actively shame and twist the knife and say you're a non-committal piece of shit. Like the things that people fear.
How
that,
dare you?
yeah, you're going to be so mad at me. I'm like, there's no food decision you could make ever that will make us as a coach like, I'm so fucking mad that you had that cookie. It's just, it doesn't ever actually happen. But I finished the post by saying and I believe this so strongly, there's never a scenario, even if you don't come to an immediate solution to whatever you're experiencing, there's no scenario where you open up with your coach about what you're struggling with and collaborate with them and you don't instantly feel somewhat better. Whereas we know that the basically guaranteed net result of you shying away from this coach who is available, again, maybe I'm being generous saying the coach who is always available to you, but ideally most coaches, is that you're going to feel worse. And maybe that's like too simplistic. And I know there are mental hurdles for a lot of people, but just think the last X times that you talked with your coach and said, hey, I'm really struggling to manage my hunger. I'm so sorry I went over my calories first of all, you don't need to apologize for anything food related. You're fine. Yeah, so sorry. You're good. Second of all, let's look at what might have contributed to that. And the big thing that I always emphasize with my clients when we are talking about these quote unquote off track weekends and weeks is neutrality. So yes, I might give you a friendly kick in the butt from time to time if your actions are not aligning with the things that you say that you want. But in general, if you have a weekend that doesn't go well, I am looking at it through a totally neutral lens. I'm not trying to reinforce any bad relationship with food or unnecessary guilt because that doesn't really serve anybody in the long term. So, okay, you didn't make great decisions at this party. Did you show up super hungry? Did you set boundaries with the people that you needed to set boundaries with? Did you have food prepared for when you got home? Okay, it's actually a good thing when we identify those areas where you drop the ball, because now we can implement those action steps next time around. So you collaborate with your coach in a neutral way. You say, oh, okay, this is pretty straightforward. It seems like these two things will make a big difference next time. We do them next weekend, ideally. If not, guess what? You collaborate with your coach again and kind of chip away at it over time. But again, if you shy away from the person that is very eager to help you, you are always going to feel worse. And then I know from experience, from the coach's perspective, that clients who do that, it becomes this more and more daunting thing to finally check in. So you kind of go MIA for 2 or 3 weeks. It's like, hey, I'm so sorry. It becomes like, you're fine. We're good. Just like, let's get right back into it.
Yeah, that's it.
We appreciate you, Sam. Aram, did you have anything you wanted to say before wrapping up our time?
I'm gonna put Sam on the spot and make sure that he's getting his ass to Vegas in March.
I feel I have serious FOMO with all the Instagram stories that I'm seeing, the amount of people who are going. It'll literally just come down to whether or not I'm in the country, because there is a small chance that would be the month that we potentially consider move back to Europe. But barring that, I will absolutely be there.
Would you use from New York? Would you use a plane to get there?
Yes. Yeah,
so then do the same fucking thing from overseas. Get it together.
I'll charge you double.
I'm like, is
I'll
there
just charge you double for the ticket? It's fine.
That's fine.
Yeah, it's $9.98 for normal people. It'll be $19.98 for you. It's the potential presenter at some point bonus. So if you're ever going to be on that RSC stage, which I hope to get you on one of these years, that's the tax you pay to present.
It's 3,500. 3,500 flight included.
Yeah,
I will happily pay it.
You pay for the flight, you pay for the ticket. It's 3,500 all in.
Yeah,
perfect.
Included.
Sounds like a fair trade.
Yeah. Listen, Sam, we appreciate.
Yeah, man, thank you so much. This information it's exactly what our audience needs to hear, and it's helpful to them. It's tactical, and I couldn't have asked for a better episode. So thank you.
Absolutely. I was looking forward to this a lot. So thank you guys for having me on.
We'd like to wrap up with our final this or that question to see how you feel about this. This or that. Would you rather buy